I do. Okay. Hi, everybody. We are here today to get a little information on a new vet school that's opening in the US this fall, the only new one that's opening this fall. Why don't I let you do the honors of introducing yourself and your wonderful school?
Matthew Edson. I'm the Dean for the Shreiber School of Veterinary Medicine at Rowan University in New Jersey. Happy to be here.
Okay, we're seeing lots of questions online. I'm sure you guys are getting lots of questions too. So let's start with a little bit about what makes your vet school special, because I think there are some really exciting things going on there.
Wow, I think we have lots of reasons we could say that we feel like we're special here, but number one, we're the first and only vet school in the state of New Jersey. We're very, very happy to be bringing an in-state option to the folks in Jersey here who have not had that option in the past. So probably our most exciting piece there. Beyond that, being a new program with a teaching hospital, I think is really important to us. We have probably one of the few newer programs that are going to have a whole facility here for students to train in within the university setting. And we just received our letter of reasonable assurance and are opening up this coming fall for our first class. So we're super excited to welcome them here after all the work we've put in. This is a very student-centric program, and to finally get students in the program means a lot to all of us.
Yeah, that's great. I think like having that, public option in another state is such a big deal. The questions that always come up when a new school in any area, any field of study is opening is how the application process works. And I've seen lots of people with lots of ideas about how the application process works, but maybe you can tell us straight from the horse's mouth, sort of how does that application process work? What are deadlines like? What's the timeline like?
So for this year, given the timing of our accreditor approval, we're not in VEMCAS. And a lot of people have had questions about that, but we will be in the VEMCAS system next year.
Okay.
As far as this year, it's a Rowan-specific application on our website, and it's pretty closely modeled after the VEMCAS application. So unfortunately, students do have to put all their information, and again, they do have to get their letters of reference sent to us from their reviewers. We can't get that data from the VEMCAS system, but the rest of the application is very similar in structure. As far as the timing, those applications are open now, and they'll be open through December 31st.
Okay.
So December 31st being our deadline for the application to be submitted, all the letters of reference, all the transcripts, and the application fee to be paid. So have to have it all done by the end of the year, and then we'll do our review and let students know by March 15th so they can have some time to make a decision as to which school they choose and stick to the rest of the timelines pretty closely. But next year we'll be in VEMCAS, and that should be a little bit more of a streamlined system.
Okay. And is there an interview process for any students?
There is. We have a secondary stage in which students are picked for the interview. So not everyone will get an interview, but our interviews will be done remotely over like a WebEx Zoom type platform. There are multiple mini interviews. So students won't have to travel here to New Jersey, those that are chosen for that stage.
Okay. Guys, this is why I always tell you when you fill out your VMCAS, keep all the information somewhere else so that if like the great internet shuts down or something gets deleted or whatever happens, you have it. You have it for other schools. This is the perfect example of what you'd use it for. Can you give us a little more info on admissions process in terms of like, is there a vet hours requirement? Is there a suggested amount you want to see? Is there a sort of suggested GPA? Any of that stuff?
Well, so the GPA minimum cumulative to apply is 3.0. And we've had a lot of students that say, I have a 2.97, but unfortunately a 2.97 is not a 3.0. So as long as the cumulative is 3.0 or over, the application will be reviewed. As far as the hours that go into this, I think it's a slippery slope for us to say you need X number of hours. And, I tell students all the time, you could have a 10-hour experience where you learn a whole lot, or a 1,000-hour experience where you stand in a corner and don't learn anything. Yeah. So just counting hours like that, I think, is not really the best metric for us to use. But we do want students to show that they have a really good understanding of the veterinary profession. And there's lots of ways you can demonstrate that aren't necessarily just based on clocking hours. So as part of the application, if they can show us that they understand what they're signing up for and what they're getting into, you want to know that before you pick a profession. And there's lots of different ways to demonstrate that, but the hours minimum doesn't exist here.
Okay. folks that are familiar with our videos will know that I wish that the legal profession had this same safeguard in place, because I went into law school thinking like this will be great, and like a year and was like, nope, I hate this. I don't want to do this at all. So it's an asset to the school, but also to the student, for you to know something about this profession and have some experience in it and where you want to be before you enter, let's say, invest your time and money in this giant learning process, right? You shouldn't do it unless you already know enough to know, yeah, I pretty much want to know I want to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little about accreditation and how that process works, because I think people they don't get nervous, but they are maybe a little unsure of like, how does it work if I'm going to a new school and I'm going to be the first class there? Will my, degree have the same value? Will I have any stumbling blocks along the way?
The accreditation process for vet schools is very, very long and arduous, and that's by necessity. And the way it's designed is to protect the students, right? We want to make sure we have an educational program that's high quality. It's going to make high quality vets. And we want to make sure we're not admitting people who can't graduate and go and practice the profession that they've been taking all this time and money to, get into. So we received what's called a letter of reasonable assurance after a couple of visits from our accrediting body. We've been working at this for several years. That letter allows us to admit or open up applications for our first class. Once we admit that class and they begin, we then send a letter to the accreditors and say, we've admitted our class, they've started, and then they will grant us a provisional accreditation that's basically backdated to the date that they start. So by the time a student gets here, they will be in an accreditation status, while the letter that we got now is technically a pre-accreditation action and not an accreditation status. Upon entry of the students, we'll have provisional accreditation. That means, as far as the student is concerned, that they'll be able to graduate from the program and sit and take the national licensing exam and become a veterinarian with a DVM degree that allows them to do that. And that's a protective mechanism, so those students don't start a program and then finish a program and not be able to go and practice professionally. Right. So while the accreditation statuses are different as far as the administration of the school is concerned, for the purposes of the student, if you're admitted as a provisionally accredited school student or a fully accredited school student, the outcome for the student will be the same at the end as far as them being able to be licensed.
Yeah, and you guys aren't the first. I mean, if for people who are applying to vet school this year, maybe it's the first time you're looking at applying to vet schools, but those of us who look at this all the time, we've seen other schools go through this process. It's not like you're the first school to ever go through this process. As new schools come online, they get this provisional letter, they enroll a class, and then, they move through this process in a pretty predictable way.
And the accrediting body watches that very carefully too. Every 6 months, we have interim reports due. And at the end of the first class's second year, we have another visit. And at the end of the first class's fourth year, we have another visit. So these programs, new like us, can't even become fully accredited until at least the first class reaches their graduation. It's a very long process. And that doesn't count the 2 or 3 years we've been at it already before we even got to this stage. But again, it's all quality protection for students, and we're all about that. That's what we want to see in all the programs.
This may be an uninformed question, but I see this question show up a lot about other schools. And so I think I'll ask it about your school. I often see students looking for like, what's a school that's known for large animal, or that's known for wildlife, or, that sort of has like a reputation in this area. Do you all have a focus area in mind, or an area where you think, well, this is really a place we shine or want to be a leader? Or are you looking at a more general approach? Is that going to evolve on its own?
I think everybody has asked me that question in any interview I've ever done. And, I think for us, it's very important that we are creating new graduates who feel like they're prepared to enter the workforce at an entry level. That doesn't mean I expect them to jump out and say, hey, let me do a GDV and a splenectomy and see 25 emergency appointments, right? But we want people to graduate from here and feel like they're adequately prepared to enter the workforce. And maybe that sounds really basic. I mean, for me, it is pretty basic, but I know that there's challenges in getting everyone to graduate from programs to feel that way. So I think research is important, and specialization is important, and all the great things we're going to do in our hospital are important. I mean, all these things are certainly really important parts of a program. but to all of us here, making the students who are our biggest customers feel like they got their money's worth from all the time and
Yeah.
capital they put into this experience, and coming out of this program and saying, all right, I feel like I'm ready to go. That's what I want us to be known for.
Yeah.
All the other stuff is kind of icing, right? But that's
Right.
really our core mission here. It's a veterinary school. It's designed
Yeah.
to teach people to be good doctors.
I love hearing that because I think sometimes, I'm speaking generally, not about any particular institution, but sometimes in the world of academia, we could get sort of caught up in like, oh, these are our missions and our values and all these things that are really important. But like the point of professional schooling is to train you to enter a profession and to meet the standards of that profession. The other stuff is also great, but you know, it's defined as a profession for a reason, and it has a set of benchmarks that you want to feel that competency in. It helps you be prepared to like go forward in that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not the average vet school dean, right? Like I'm a general practitioner, and I've had to hire a lot of the products of vet programs, and I've seen where the pros and cons of that are in
Yep.
working with students and having new hires. And you know, I saw something on the internet the other day, you know, and take it as it is, it's the internet, about the Krebs cycle and this cartoon about how many times a client asks you about the details of the Krebs cycle, right? And while that's an important thing to understand the concept of,
Right.
at the end of the day, nobody's asked me that in practice, but they do want to know what the basic vaccines for their puppy are, right?
Right.
So we need to make sure that everyone has the foundational knowledge to be good doctors, but has the realistic interpersonal and real world knowledge to be able to go out and do this job. And sometimes those two things can be a little bit at odds, given the
Yeah.
short amount of time we have to pack a lot of information into students' heads in 4 years. But
Yeah.
we really want people to come out feeling like we prepared them to do this.
Yeah. Well, and I think having the teaching hospital there matches that. You know, I always love to see that like the party line matches what the place is doing. So you're saying we really want these people to be prepared. And then like, here's our hospital on site where they learn how to be prepared. And it all goes together. I think a big question right now in the veterinary medicine world, I don't know if it's a question so much as a discussion point or a idea on people's minds, is the idea of mental health. You know, we see sort of students experiencing burnout, and we hear stories of veterinarians in the veterinary profession say like, I'm at my wit's end. And so as a new school, I wonder if that's been a consideration at all in designing programming, designing, you know, all those things that contribute to that student experience.
I mean, that's been a piece of everything, right? I mean, I went to a vet school that I absolutely loved, but it didn't have a lot of windows, right? I remember going in the morning, it was dark, and leaving at night, it was dark. And there's something about that like lack of daylight thing. And they fixed it now. They've put in windows since I graduated. They do a beautiful job with that, right? But it went down to the basics of even how we designed this building.
Oh, wow.
And our building has a lot of glass and a lot of windows and common areas. And even on the second floor, there's like an outside kind of garden terrace area where people can go and eat lunch. So we want people to feel like it's a welcoming environment. It's a bright environment, right? And I think just starting with that and thinking about how the students feel and how welcome and comfortable they are in the building is a starting point for that. I think certainly mental health is a major concern in the vet industry. And we need to be sensitive to that, but we also need to prepare students for the realities of what exists in the world. So as much as we want to be super kind and gentle through the course of their program, we have to also inject a little bit of reality in there, because while we can protect them from the real world while they're here, we can't do that after they graduate. So I think preparing them to operate in that environment is important. And those things come into our clinical and professional skills curriculum. But we're not just talking about how to place an IV catheter, but we're talking about how to deal with an upset client, because it's very intimidating to be a brand new doctor, have all these fresh clinical skills, but not have her been yelled at by someone who's upset about their bill before. I'm not going to yell at them to train them for that, but we're certainly going to give them strategies so they know how to cope with that afterwards. And I think if you've been trained to deal with those situations, they're a little less shocking when you come out. We can never really change everyone else's behavior, but we can teach students as new doctors how to cope and contend with that in a healthy way.
It's not a theoretical job. It's a real job that exists in the world. By the way, this comment I'm about to make has not been co-signed by anyone else in this call, but this is why I always tell students, please, please do not write in your vet school application that you want to be a vet because you don't like people. I've always connected to animals because I don't like working with people. Guess who you're going to be working with in vet school and as a professional?
There aren't a lot of dogs with credit cards and checkbooks, right? Like somebody comes along and there's a lot of client interaction with that. It's not just the payment piece, but they're not driving themselves to your office, right? So if you don't like interacting with people, this is probably not a good job for you. So,
Or at least don't write it down. We
yeah,
don't-
right.
you
Well,
know,
certainly don't want to tell us that,
a
because
lot of
then
us
it's a
have
red-
days where we wish there were fewer people in our lives, or people we interact with that we could do without. But I've read so many, essays that start with the same 4 quotes and then talk about how they don't like people. And I think you're trying to sell people reading this essay on wanting to work with you as a person. It's not the pitch line for you.
I think the other half of that is students sometimes don't value the experiences that have taught them to work with people enough to include them in their resume, right? And
Mm,
I've said to students before, like, you were a waitress or you were a bartender, or, right? Like, I'd be terrible at those jobs, but if you've
right,
learned to do that and someone's mad that their cheeseburger's cooked wrong, you've learned to deal with that sort of social interaction.
right.
And I think it's very important for them to share their ability to operate in society based on prior experience like
Yeah,
that on an application, because
yeah,
we can't really teach you to be a good, productive human as much as we can teach you clinical and veterinary skills. But if you've picked that up in the course of your existence before vet school,
right, right.
that's a really important life skill. And I've had students say, should I put this on a resume? Well, of course you should. These are all important life skills that are going
Yeah.
to make you a better practitioner after graduation, right?
We always talk about with resumes and applications, if it's easy to decide how to put on the stuff you've done with animals and veterinarians and research. But for the other stuff, you were captain of the lacrosse team, you worked at the mall, you were a waitress, whatever. Put it on there and focus on the pieces of it that would be relevant to professional development, leadership development, any of those things. So we don't need a million details on your lacrosse wins if you're the captain of the lacrosse team, but the fact that you had to run practices for 40 people and you moved up from co-captain to captain, tell us something. So put the pieces that we don't need a lot of information on the store you worked in, just the pieces that tell us something about your leadership experience, your growth, your people skills, all that stuff.
You can delegate to a lacrosse team, you can delegate to a veterinary staff, right?
Yeah.
And those are difficult skills to learn unless you've applied them somewhere before, right? So
Yeah.
I really am a big believer in that, but sometimes those things fall by the wayside and they shouldn't.
But then again, I got a resume from a veterinarian for a job at one point that had an entire page of cooking skills. Like, that's too much information on your cooking skills. You could throw it in, but we want the qualities that are relevant to, you as a student or you as a professional. Okay, so if you could, let's say I'm a high school senior, I don't know, whatever, high school junior, college freshman. I think I'm going to go to vet school. I'm trying to figure out what else I should be doing. What would be your top 2 tips? What should I be doing?
Well, I mean, a lot of those students are about 4 years away from getting to us, but I think you have to start preparing early, right? And while we don't like to emphasize solely academics because there's lots of other pieces, you have to prove to us academically that you can handle the rigor of a DVM program, which is a big challenge, right? It's a pretty big transition just to go from high school to undergrad, but then to go from undergrad and have semesters of just really high level science classes is a whole nother transition. So we want to make sure that students are going to come in and be able to be successful in that environment. So you should have good academics, but I wouldn't have placed so much emphasis on your academics that you don't go and do anything else outside of the academic world, because we all have friends that were straight A students that probably wouldn't be our pick for the family veterinarian, right? It's not all about academics. There's a lot of other factors in there. So you want to make sure that you are savvy enough to not just let all the rest of it go by the wayside and attempt to get straight A's. So
Yeah.
I think getting involved in some of the things that you've mentioned, like go be on the lacrosse team, go learn to do beekeeping, go volunteer in an animal shelter, but that doesn't mean you can't go be a lifeguard at the beach for the summer, right? Like,
Right.
this is your time to have all those life experiences and enjoy being a kid while gaining some practical and life experience you can apply to your job later.
Yeah. And
So
I am going to add my plug that I add for everybody. write down what you did because you won't remember it when
Yeah.
you're elderly like me and you just forget like entire swaths of your life. Especially when we talk about hours, obviously hours aren't the whole story, but in 4 years when you're filling out the application and you go, what was that place I worked for 2 weeks over Christmas break or whatever? Whether you write it in a notebook or a Google Doc or something, just keep track of who you worked with, what you did there, what you got to see. That guy who came to talk to your class about sea turtles, who you thought was really interesting. Like the more you keep that information, you'll be very happy that you kept it because you never know who it can connect you to later, what it can connect you to. I try to always emphasize to students that the veterinary world is not very big. It People know, especially if you have, if you are in the sort of wildlife side or whatever, which tends to be what we deal with, but every veterinarian has opportunities to connect you to all kinds of other opportunities if you do a good job, and probably knows someone else that you're interested in working with. So keeping track of that information can be really helpful.
Yeah, and not burning any bridges in the process, right? Because it is a very, very small world. There aren't a lot of vet schools, which means there aren't a lot of vet grads, and all of us have seen each other somewhere at some conference or something. So, you got to remember that you're joining a pretty elite small profession, even from the very early stages, and
Yeah.
making sure you make a lot of friends along the way. But don't sign up for a volunteer experience that you don't show up for, because someone's going to remember that, right? And that's going to come
Yeah.
back to visit you again later sometime. So.
And if you do, because we all have things happen and mistakes happen and scheduling problems and stuff that gets away from you, call them up and say, I'm really
Communicate.
sorry. I was signed up for this. I failed my math test. I have to stay for 2 weeks. It's not going to fit in my schedule. Everyone understands these things. We're human beings. But if the person just disappears from
Yep.
the ether and then 2 years later, someone else goes, hey, I saw they were from your hometown. Do you know this person? You're like, yeah, I do. They never showed up.
Yeah, right. So, and that's life, right? And that's another
Yeah.
reason that all these little experiences kind of make sense to put onto an application, or just live your life the right way, right?
For sure. And that's what we always say about like the student who's losing their mind because they didn't do well in chemistry the first time. Everybody in the professional world can understand taking a class and it doesn't go great. And then, you take it again and you get a tutor or you get free help from your school or you use Khan Academy or something and you get your grade up. And anybody looking at that can see like, oh, this person is competent and capable and can succeed in this profession. Where like just a solid sort of string of mediocre, I didn't show up, I didn't try, I didn't do it. You think, I don't know.
Not many people want to take chemistry once, right? So if you had the fortitude to take it twice because you really wanted to put that extra effort in
Yeah.
yourself, then that's something that looks pretty good, right? The
Yeah.
ability to overcome adversity and adapt to things is something that's pretty essential for this job. So even overcoming a bad grade in a chemistry course is evidence of that.
Yeah. No one's expecting you to do everything perfectly from 7th grade until you apply for vet school to get in. But
Well,
there,
and you shouldn't expect them to do it perfectly after they finish vet school either, because it's
sure.
the practice of veterinary medicine for a reason. That's just life.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of final thoughts here on, let's say a student is interested. They're thinking this might be the vet school for me. I don't know. I live in New Jersey, or I want to go to school in the Northeast, or I just am really excited about this new opportunity. Where do they get more information? Can they do an online tour? Who do they talk with? What do they do next?
Our website's SVM, like svm.rowan.edu.
Okay.
Most of the information is on there. We have a wonderful staff of admissions folks who are happy to answer anyone's questions. And, some of the things may not be absolutely clear. And if they're not, call us, email us. We're here to help. And we're here for students. It's a vet school, right? So don't feel like you can't reach out and get those questions answered. We don't really have much in the way of tours yet because the building's like 55% done. So, I mean, it looks pretty cool. There's a lot of steel up and we have some walls now, but we don't really have a lot to give people physical tours of. But we're happy to answer any questions anyone might have about what facilities are coming, what we're going to offer here on campus, and things along those lines. So shoot us an email, give us a call. We're happy to talk to anybody.
Okay. And that was a very kind way of saying what I'll say a little more directly. You don't have to guess. You can call them and ask. The people of the internet are great for getting the general opinions from, but for getting really detailed, like Can I replace my bad chemistry grade with my second grader? Or are they going to average together? Can I take my prereqs online? Can I take them at a community college? My transcript calls it animal nutrition instead of, these little nuanced questions. Ask the school. I'm begging you, just right. You would want them to just call and ask.
And people do all day long, and we're here for that. But I
Right.
know there are other people who are asking the internet and maybe not getting the most clear or correct answers. So
There's a
call
lot
us so we don't tell you after your application's process that it's disqualified you because someone on the internet gave you bad information.
You're committing, guys, when you're deciding to go to vet school, so much time, so much money, so much energy, so much passion, a huge portion of your life to this process. Give it the extra 10 minutes to call the school and like make sure the transcript is going to the right place. It's worth that time. And I've seen so many times people say like, oh, I didn't know that for this school, I couldn't, I'm giving general examples, but like, just they would love to tell you and give you the correct information, and they're going to know.
And if not, we'll figure it out. We've had a lot of very interesting requests and some very interesting questions, but we've been able to resolve them all. And it's our first time with this admission cycle too, right? So
Yeah.
some things that are still a little bit out there in the ether, but we will help clear them up for you to the best of our ability. Just reach out.
Yes, please, please. I'm begging you all, call the school and ask them. Okay, so this is very exciting that they can still apply. They can use a lot of the same information as the VMCAS. They can reach you guys and get answers to everything. I think it's a great option for folks to look at and consider. I know that the vet school admissions process is daunting, to say the least. And I think it's helpful for folks to see like there's real human people that are there and trying to help you. It doesn't mean everyone will get in, but it means you can have a real discussion and a human discussion about what you need, what you're looking for, what's available, see if it's a fit for you, make sure you have all the requirements you need, check and make sure you've gotten everything in. You don't need to treat it like it's this kind of ivory tower that you can't access and reach, and you're just mailing off this packet and hoping for the best. You can make it more of a conversation and be a little more, in that case, prepared for what's reasonable to expect from that process.
Absolutely. We're not that scary. Give us a call. We're happy to talk.
All right. Hey, thanks for talking with us today. And guys, I'll try to put the link to the site that we were talking about in the comments here so that you can just click there if you want more information.
Thanks, Jane.
All right, thanks.